back, telling his castmates reportedly he did not fake this hate crime. Good morning, everybody. You've almost made it through the week. I'm Bill Hammer, live in New York City. Big welcome back to you, Heather.
And what a week it has been.
Yes, indeed.
I'm Heather Childers in for Sandra Smith again. Jussie Smollett released on bond after prosecutors outlined their case against the 36-year-old actor, accusing him of orchestrating an assault on himself and then claiming that he was the victim of a racist and homophobic attack.
Smollett asked Ola if he could trust him. When Ola said he could, Smollett detailed his plans of the attack to the brothers. Smollett stated that he wanted them to appear to attack him on the evening of January 28, 2019, near his apartment building in Streeterville.
So Smollett's lawyers firing back overnight. They're going after the police. Quote, the presumption of innocence, a bedrock in the search for justice, was trampled upon at the expense of Mr. Smollett, end quote. Matt Finn back on the story, live in the streets of Chicago. Matt.
Bill, Heather, this city's police superintendent and the state's attorney's office slamming Jussie Smollett, saying he orchestrated this elaborate hoax and set up a alleged false fake death threat letter because he was upset about how much he was being paid and because he wanted to advance his career. Well, now Jussie Smollett's legal team is fighting back, saying in a statement, quote, Mr. Smollett is a young man of impeccable character and integrity who fiercely and solemnly maintains his innocence and feels betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and pursue a change in tone from 20th Century Fox that in previous statements really stood by Jussie Smollett. They now say they're considering their options. Also in court yesterday, the judge publicly chastised Smollett, saying if the part about the noose is true, it's outrageous because it conjures up the most evil part of this country's history. Chicago's police superintendent says Chicago embraced this actor and then he slapped the city in the face.
Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile?
The FBI is also investigating that alleged death threat letter, and if it's determined that Smollett played a part in that letter or sent it to himself, Smollett faces some serious federal charges. And we do know that Jussie Smollett left jail yesterday and arrived to the Fox studios, where it cannot confirm if he is working just yet. 20th Century Fox this morning is not confirming if he is back on the set and working, but he did arrive here yesterday right after he left jail. Bill, Heather.
Finn, thank you. We'll talk to you throughout the morning here in Chicago, leading our coverage today. Thanks.
Well, the White House backing off plans for a full troop with Kevin Corke is live at the White House. So, Kevin, what is the White House thinking on Syria?
The idea is simple, actually. It's called transitional security. Now, for the people at home that may not have understood or heard about this story before, the president insisted that we get American troops out of there. They've been there long enough. Their mission has been very defined, and so he wanted U.S. troops to get out of Syria broadly. Now, that said, they want a responsible removal of U.S. forces from the zone, and clearly they don't want to create a strategic vacuum. So some troops, as you point out, will remain.
This is a rough estimate, about 200, not a specific number. We're in constant contact with our allies. At the end of the day, the president wants to bring our troops home, and he's working towards that. He wants to do that in a safe and peaceful way.
I'm always going to be happy with the president pulling our men and women in harm's way out of harm's way, and also doing so responsibly. I agree. I believe that the 200 that are remaining will keep Turkey out of the Syrian conflict, but will also keep Iran's ambitions at bay.
John James there. Lindsey Graham, meanwhile, senator from the great state of South Carolina, said this in a statement. This will ensure ISIS does not return and that Iran does not fill the vacuum that would have been left if we completely withdrew. Now, you may also recall that the president's decision to call for troop pullout from Syria really was frankly criticized by some and raised eyebrows, to say the least, over the Pentagon. So this decision to leave at least a small cadre of fighting forces there in a support role primarily will be met with welcome, we imagine, of the Pentagon.
Yeah, well, so there's another issue today. What is the White House saying about this lawsuit by the family of the ISIS bride?
Yeah, they are aware of the lawsuit and understand that as this review continues, a couple of things are very important, and most notably that is the status of the individual that has been named. We talked about her yesterday. Hoda Mathana was born in New Jersey. She was born to a diplomatic parent. Her father was a diplomat from Yemen. Now, he says, and there's some documentation that suggests this is true, he ended his mission a month before she was born. But there's also some legal wiggle room there. There are some who would say that as long as you are here under that type of visa, you have to leave the country, then come back on a separate visa. Thus, she's not an American citizen. Let me read part of the lawsuit. It says this: they're seeking an injunctive relief, preventing the U.S. government from unconstitutionally robbing her and her son of their rights as U.S. citizens, that is. Now, her attorney is obviously saying, look, I want her to be able to come here and have due process rights like any other American. Mike Pompeo, however, has been very strong in his contention that she's simply not an American. And let me share part of a statement we got from him yesterday. We also saw him on our air with Mornings with Maria Bartiromo over on Fox Business. He said this is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist. She's not coming back. That sentiment echoed by the president. We saw a tweet where he said he and Pompeo agreed she's not due to come back here. So it's a very interesting story, one that will now make its way through the courts.
All right, we'll see. Kevin Cork, live for us. Thank you, Kevin. Well, the decision to keep some of those troops in Syria, going back to that, earning some praise from lawmakers, including Senator Lindsey Graham. He a critic of the initial withdrawal plan, and we'll have more on this when the senator joins us in studio at 10:30.
Looking forward to talking to him. Meantime, I got a Fox News alert breaking from the Hill at the moment. House Democrats a moment ago, taking aim at the president's border security push, they just introduced a resolution aimed at blocking the emergency declaration. Now, Democrats in the Senate planning a similar move. Want to bring in Matt Schlapp. Matt's the former White House political director, chairman of the American Conservative Union, joins us from D.C. Matt, good morning to you. Likely going to pass in the House. What's the effect of this, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this sets up one of the most important themes or conversations the country's going to have heading into the presidential campaign in 2020. And that's this basic question. Do we secure our southern border, or do we do just the opposite? Do we outlaw ICE? Do we deplete these funds? And do we allow people to simply walk into America when they want to?
All right. Chuck Schumer says they'll do the same thing in the Senate. Here's a statement from the Senate Minority Leader. This issue transcends partisan politics, and I urge all senators, Democrats and Republicans, to support this resolution to terminate the president's emergency declaration when it comes up for a vote in the Senate. Apparently, there's a provision in that bill that requires the Senate to vote on this within 18 days. So it's going to happen. They need 4 Republicans to join them. Susan Collins of Maine already indicated that she will. Do you think they'll get there, Matt?
I think they have a chance, definitely, in the Senate to get the Republicans they need. But remember, there's 2 important things here, Bill, to remember, which is if a bill were to pass the House and the Senate, the president will most assuredly veto it. They'd need 2/3 to override. So there's no chance this emergency declaration is stopped. The second thing is you just said that they have to pick it up within 18 days. You know why, Bill? Because Congress passed a law that allows presidents to declare emergencies. That's why we've had over 50 declared. We have over 30 currently in effect. The law was passed, and President Trump is simply following that law.
You're making the case that you can win on this politically. That's what you stated.
We can win. We can win legislatively and definitely win politically. The American people don't think it makes sense to have a porous southern border where drugs and terrorists and people in gangs can just walk into our country. They don't like it, and we should be able to win that argument.
Let's take our discussion overseas. Next week's a big week, Matt. Here is Sarah Sanders just from last hour about the summit with Chairman Kim in Hanoi, Vietnam.
We're making progress. The president's in no hurry, particularly as long as things continue to move forward in a positive manner and as long as the conversations continue to go well. Again, we'll see what happens. I think that the only one setting high expectations is probably the media, because they're looking for reasons to attack this president.
So we'll see what we get from this, Matt. At the same time, so you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, essentially, for all the action in Hanoi, Vietnam. On Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, House Democrats will have Michael Cohen publicly testify about payments that were made prior to the election in 2016. At the same time, you're going to have a split screen with the president negotiating on nuclear war with Chairman Kim. Do you think that hearing continues? If so, what about the water's edge, a commander-in-chief overseas? How does that look? How does that appear in such a significant week for this presidency, Matt?
That's a great question, Bill. I don't like the optics of it. I think we have one president. Barack Obama was my president. Donald Trump is my president. And when they're overseas doing the nation's business, especially on something which is so bipartisan, every American can agree it would be better for the world if the Korean Peninsula was denuclearized. And so I do think it looks like they're playing politics. My guess is Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and her gang in the caucus will continue to look as political as they need to keep their socialist base happy. So I don't look for any changes on that. And when it comes to North Korea, I think the president's doing the right thing, Bill. Remember, we haven't seen them testing missiles. We haven't seen, the threat of a horrible weapon landing in our territories or in Hawaii. This is a big step. Just talking to the North Korean dictator has created a change in the dynamic, and we could go further because the experts in North Korea I talk to tell me that North Korea is in a terrible bind when it comes to their finances. They actually need to change the dynamics, or it's not just their people who will starve, but the Kim family itself.
If that's the case, if you don't push it forward, you can crank up the sanctions yet again. My point, Matt, is that the next 7 days will be significant on both fronts, with the Mueller report hanging out there, the Cohen testimony in this North Korean summit overseas. Thank you, Matt.
That's right. Thanks, Bill.
Slap there in Washington. That summit with Chairman Kim begins on Tuesday. I'll be there in Hanoi for America's Newsroom, along with my colleagues. And on Sunday night, Ed Henry's going to kick off our coverage, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Check out Ed's Sunday night here on the Fox News Channel as we go all week next week from Vietnam.
Exciting to be there. Well, a judge refusing to grant bail for the U.S.
Smollett paid $3,500 to stage this attack and drag Chicago's reputation through the mud in the process. And why? This stunt was orchestrated by Smollett because he was dissatisfied with his salary. So he concocted a story about being attacked.
Eddie Johnson, so impressive. Outrage from Chicago police. Jussie Smollett fighting back now. Former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis here to take us through this. Sir, good morning to you. I thought with Johnson's quote, I hope the truth gets the same amount of attention as the hoax, end quote. Let's see if that's the case. If Smollett's going to mount a defense here, which all signs indicate he will, what would his defense be, sir?
Well, you're already seeing some signs of it.
That has no place in the American legal system. Mr. Smollett's a young man of impeccable character and integrity who fiercely and solemnly maintains his innocence, betrayed by a system that apparently wants to skip due process and proceed directly to sentencing. My sense here is the case, if it goes to trial, is decided by these two witnesses. They'll get on the stand and jurors would gauge their testimony and how credible they are. In addition, you've got a small amount of physical evidence. You've got the phone, a text message, you've got a check that was cashed, and you have a receipt from a hardware store. What am I missing?
Well, you've touched on most of the information, but when you have two young men who are giving you a statement, and you can go back and corroborate that statement with all that evidence you just mentioned, in addition to the documentary evidence and the electronic evidence, you've got video evidence. You can actually see them moving around, going to the places. That's very, very powerful to a jury. And so what you find is that when in this system, a defense attorney will attack the only people that they can attack, which is the accusers, the police, and that's playing itself out. But we're very used to that, and there's enough evidence here to move forward without a doubt.
Okay, last question here. The prosecutor yesterday from Chicago talked about establishing this relationship with the brothers, the bodybuilders there who worked with him on set, about the text messages going offline. Apparently the one message says, let's talk face to face. Apparently they cased the scene. This is what the state alleges now. And that he told them the night of the incident, don't bring your cell phone. So it keeps adding up in that sense. Final word.
No question. The cell phone is extremely powerful evidence. It places somebody at a particular location. And it goes to saying, when he said, do this on the down low, he clearly had a plan in place, and that is very powerful for a jury.
Yeah, I thought that police chief was so impressive yesterday. I mean,
he's a good man.
He was, you know him, he was essentially saying that you weaponized race and you weaponized sex in America for your own gain.
Right. He touched on all of the important parts. I've worked with Eddie for 20 years now. Tremendously talented police commissioner. Anthony Guglielmi is his PR person. They got together. They talked about this, and the information that you see is based on the evidence, and that's really what's important.
Thanks, Ed. Ed Davis, Las Vegas today. Thank you, sir. We'll see you real soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great to talk to you.
20 past the hour.
Problem grow so strong in the first place. Heather?
All right. Benjamin Hall, live for us. Thank you.
Some new criticism today for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this time an editorial slamming her as economically illiterate and explaining why that's a bad thing for the country. So what's that all about?
And Michael Cohen testifying on Capitol Hill next week amid reports the Mueller investigation could also wrap up very soon. So what will we hear?
The special counsel needs to bring his evidence forward, if he has any, and let's get on with it. The American people deserve to have this thing wrapped up and over with.
Put the keys down, Kevin. But I'm going to drive home. There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving. I've taken 25 selfies in the last 10.
Here in New York, off and running on the stock market, up about triple digits a moment ago at the open here. We're down about 100 points yesterday. A lot of this right now, watching these trade talks with China. At 2:30 this afternoon, the president will sit down with the trade negotiators from Beijing at the White House. So we're watching that for any movement, any hints, any signs as to where they are now and where they might be going. 1 week from today is the deadline to get a deal where you increase the tariff percentage on the products that China's selling to the U.S. Is that deadline firm and fast, or could it move a little bit? We're going to talk about that with Art Laffer coming up momentarily as the world is watching these negotiations. All right, 9:32. Heather.
All right. Well, Michael Cohen, speaking of the world watching, he's set to testify on Capitol Hill next week, starting first behind closed doors at the Senate Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, and then a public hearing Wednesday before the House Oversight Committee. So let's bring in Chris Swecker. He's the former assistant director of the FBI. Thank you for coming in. Nice to see you.
I see you.
So what about the timing of this? Let's begin there in terms of this testimony happening on Wednesday.
Well, we know that there's a potential for the special counsel to drop his report sometime maybe over the next week or two. I think that he'll let the Attorney General get his sea legs under him before he actually does. So we have the testimony coming up, but it does have some parameters set around it. So it's going to be interesting to see what he's allowed to testify to, or what the committee chair will, whether he'll respect those parameters that the special counsel has asked for. And basically that's no Russia testimony.
And some of the Republicans have said they're not going to stick to some of these parameters that have been mentioned.
Not a surprise.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a pretty freewheeling hearing. It's going to get interesting, I think.
So why are they doing it? I mean, in terms of happening while the president is overseas dealing with North Korea?
I don't have much faith in congressional investigations to begin with. I mean, they're always predetermined. They have the potential to step on a real investigation, whether it's conducted by a federal agency or the special counsel, what have you. I've had a lot of experience with that over the years, and they tend to draw out statements from witnesses, multiple statements, which is not good for the prosecutor. And so the prosecutor drives them crazy because it's not the type of thing that they want their witnesses going through, so if he happens to be a witness.
Well, and I was going to say, you mentioned no Russia collusion. They're supposed to not touch on that. So what is it that they're looking for from him?
Well, there's one side that is going to make him out to be, you know, this big star witness, payments, truth teller. Yeah. Then there's the other side that's going to say he's a serial liar, that he's someone who hung around the president to basically monetize his relationship with the president. He's a scavenger, which he is.
Well, he has been caught lying.
Has been.
Yes.
Yeah, he is a serial liar, and he's the type of witness that you have a lot of trouble putting on the witness stand. I mean, there's a bunch of silk stocking lawyers out there that would love to get in line to cross-examine him, I'm sure.
So what is being alleged is that this, in fact, would be impeachable offenses in terms of the president and his knowledge of the payments to Stormy Daniels, amongst others.
Right. I think they have couched it in his plea deal in terms of a campaign, an illicit campaign contribution, something of value to the campaign. He has other issues, but those don't really involve the president. So I think what the anti-Trump side will try to do is, this is sort of like a John Edwards type prosecution, pay off someone to stay silent, and that's a campaign contribution of some
right. And you and I talked about that case back when that was happening.
We sure did, back in North Carolina in the day, and it didn't pass then, and it couldn't convince the jury. These are the types of cases that a good lawyer can really muddy up the waters and confuse the jury over.
Do you expect the same outcome with these allegations, or do you think that this will rise to the level of impeachment?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that politics is going to come into play. I think the report will come in. There may be another indictment even before or after the report. I think that there's going to be a lot of people around the president that are now being prosecuted. There might be some embarrassing information, but I don't think there's any way that the president actually successfully gets impeached. He may not even get to the level of a House vote on impeachment, because I think there's a lot of blue dog Democrats that are going to have a crisis moment like Manchin, and that they may not even get a vote in the House.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people look at as before we get to the Mueller investigation and whether or not that will be released next week, as some say. Embarrassing the president with these type of issues when he is on an international level trying to negotiate denuclearization with North Korea.
But not surprising, given sort of the polarization that we have in our country right now. I mean, there's no doubt that Russia did something really bad. I mean, they're up to no good all the time. Vladimir Putin would do anything he could to undermine our democracy. And I think there were a lot of people, as I said, that hung around the presidential candidate and before he was a presidential candidate to monetize their relationships with him. And some of these people went overboard. The real question is, was there some link to Russia?
And do you think that report will come out next week? And do you expect what the public will find out will be extensive?
Not initially. I think the report, my former boss, Director Mueller, is going to follow the special counsel law to the T. The report's going to go over to the Attorney General, Bill Barr, who is, I'm in a breath of fresh air inside the Justice Department right now, and just what they need. And he's going to take his time with it, and then they're going to follow the process. I don't think you're going to see any grandstanding press conferences, certainly not from Mueller. He'll fade into the background. Bill Barr will be the sort of the spokesperson, if there is one, and that report may go up to Congress in a condensed form. And then that's when I think the politics start, because then it will leak in nanoseconds.
And as they've said, really regardless of the outcome of the report, Adam Schiff, amongst others, say they are going to continue to pursue it. Why do you say Bill Barr is a breath of fresh air?
He's just a good, solid, he's a former attorney general, just a good, solid lawyer. He has his political affiliations, but I served under him when as a young agent in the FBI in Miami during the drug wars, so to speak, and he was just a really good, confident, steady leader. I don't think, and I watched his confirmation hearing, I don't think he's going to let anybody push him around. I don't think he's going to let politics come into play. I think he's going to play it straight.
Well, he seems to be moving things along and already in there. All right, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. All right, Bill?
Thank you, guys. Good discussion. Thank you, Chris. Green New Deal now taking heat from both sides. Also, though, shaking up the debate. So where does this lead us? Doug McKelway has been looking at this all week now, live in D.C. What you find out, Doug?
Morning, Bill. Well, for diehard skeptics of climate change, the rollout of the Green New Deal with its wealth redistribution and its restructuring of the entire economy was a bit of a tip-off to a hidden agenda.
We always knew climate was a stalking horse for socialism, communism, totalitarianism, whatever you want to call it.
But even many Democrats who support a climate change agenda saw the rollout as an absurd overreach.
I've read it and I've reread it, and I asked Ed Markey, what in the heck is this?
Well, some hope that from the excesses of the Green New Deal, more moderate voices emerge.
The climate debate has been driven for years by the edges of each party, and having a more aggressively unrealistic left edge to contradict the irresponsible right edge is not likely to actually create the kind of consensus that's necessary to have meaningful change.
Others question whether there is any urgency at all to the climate debate, that the so-called 97% consensus of climate scientists is meaningless. Climatologist John Christie of the University of Alabama notes that the greatest scientific discoveries in history have broken with consensus.
Take a real hard look at climate model output and can demonstrate that these models are just too sensitive to carbon dioxide, and that the real world is not spiraling off into some dangerous territory of climate.
Novelist Michael Crichton once suggested in a lecture another solution. He looked back to the turn of the last century when people, quote, didn't know what radio was, or an airport, or a movie, or a television, or a computer, or a cell phone, or a jet, an antibiotic, a rocket, a satellite, an MRI, ICU, IUD, or what IBM was. Well, in that lecture, he went on and on. You get his point. If humankind is to impact climate change for the better, he felt that it may come from the tinkerer, the genius, the technology yet unknown, not from the imposition of restrictions from a centralized government. Bill?
Good stuff, Doug. Thank you. More to come later tonight, 6 o'clock. Doug McKelwey in D.C. Thank you, sir. Heather?
Well, let's talk about this. Nike investigating that bizarre situation from Wednesday night. Did you see this? The Duke basketball star Zion Williamson falling after his shoe basically exploded. It split open on the court against rival UNC. Williamson forced to leave the game with a knee sprain. And Nike says it's an isolated occurrence. The company has been ridiculed, of course, on social media over this, and its shares dropping 1%. So hit him in the wallet.
Keep an eye on that today. Congratulations to Tar Heels. They put a great game on the road.
Yes, that's what matters. They won.
That was a remarkable moment. You're 36 seconds into the biggest game of the year, arguably one of the best, if not the best player.
And people paid major money to watch him play.
That they did.
Yeah.
We're coming up with March Madness right next month. Okay, tough story here now. Longtime college basketball head coach Jim Boeheim striking and killing a man with his car on a highway at midnight the other night. So what police are saying about that coming up today.
Plus, trade talks going on with China. Will negotiators get to a deal before the March 1st deadline? Former Reagan economic advisor Art Laffer will join us up next.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
Put the key negotiators in Washington trying to deal with China. A lot of pressure on both sides. A deadline coming that could trigger higher tariffs on Chinese products, and we know their economy's hurting. Former economics advisor to Ronald Reagan, Art Laffer's back here today from a rainy Nashville, Tennessee. How you doing, Art? Nice to see you.
Very well, Bill. Thank you very much.
You. So you want to paint this in a way that is very significant, not just to the U.S. economy today, but for a very long time in the future. Go ahead and lay out that idea.
Oh, I really do. I mean, this is like the Kennedy round tariff negotiation in the 60s that led to a long period of prosperity, 35% reduction in tariff rates. It's the opposite of what happened under Nixon, where we put the 10% import surcharge. We had the job development credit, which caused a horrible 1970s economy. And, of course, the classic one of all was the Great Depression, which was brought on by the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930-31, which collapsed the U.S. economy and gave us as a present the Great Depression. This is really important. And for two reasons, Bill. One, two people who are very similar can trade with each other by specializing. But here we have two countries that are as different as night and day, and trade between these two countries, the U.S. and China, will have way more impact on the U.S. economy and the Chinese economy for decades and decades to come. It is imperative they get it done.
What you're pushing for is cultural change.
Totally.
Easier said than done. You can get Beijing to buy all kinds of products, soybeans and cars and on and on. But when it comes to intellectual property protection and forced technology transfer and then verifying it, that is a big hill to climb.
It is a big hill to climb, but
can
do
it
remember
be done?
The Chinese. Yeah. I mean, the Chinese are not oblivious of this either. They understand the same issues the Americans do, and they know what's right and they know what's wrong, and it's just getting them together to see it and to do it correctly without acting as if you were a selfish, self-interested nationalist. We need to do it on a global scale so everyone's protected and we have good free trade without someone trying to take advantage of the other person.
Yeah, no, someone said if you don't do it now, you'll never get it done. This is your only bite at the apple.
Well,
are you in that school?
At 78 years old, of course I am. What can I tell you? I mean, when I was 20, no, I think we could probably have another good shot at it 40 years from now. But right now, I think we have a great chance. And, of course, as you know, my dear friend Larry Kudlow, I trust him 100%. I think he's just phenomenal as an advisor and as a negotiator and all of this. And Mnuchin is fantastic as well.
So turn the argument around then, Art. What's in it for Beijing? If you say that the Chinese are well aware of this, what would be their incentive to go ahead and change the culture that I just laid out for you?
Oh, because the culture means that they'll benefit from trade, too. See, what they haven't understood is they're sort of much more mercantilist than we are. They think that trade is for us getting an advantage over America, and we win, they lose. It's not. The two trading partners both win. It's a win-win. It's a gains from trade, comparative advantage, all of that. And they have to be brought to this realization that this is not a nationalistic issue. Xi has behaved as quite a nationalist on this stuff, but I do think he understands that now with the threats of tariffs, he realizes his country is very vulnerable to trade with the United States. And frankly, I think he's going to come through and be really a great leader of China and agree to what's good for them and for us.
Well, I hope you're right about that. I think we've been playing a short game, Art. I think they've been playing a long game. I don't know if that's really changed just much.
Well, I don't think there is a long game. I think it's all a short game, which goes into a long game. And my guess is, Bill, that if we got a really great deal with China, within a year, the Dow would be 4,000 points higher. I mean, it's that big a deal.
Dow 30,000.
Yeah, you got it.
Why not? Last comment here. If you were to fill in the following sentence, the state of our economy today is what?
Great. Great. I mean, this president has created jobs and output that no one thought could happen, and he's done it, and he's going to continue doing it, I hope. I mean, so far, this economy has performed way above anyone's expectations. And it's all because of the Trump tax bill, the deregulation, the monetary reform that's occurred. The only thing we need to do now, Bill, is really get control of government spending, which we have not done, and that needs to be done in the next term.
22 trillion, 1.2 trillion deficit every year.
Way too much.
They could have gone further on the tax bill, though. They could have gone further for the individual, Art. For the individual, they could have done that.
You're right.
Know that.
You're right, and that's what Trump told me about 4 weeks ago. He said, we should have gone further. But
he told you
that?
We
went very far. We did yes, he did. Because I was comparing his bill to the 86 Tax Act, where we dropped the highest rate down to 28%, if you'll remember. And when he heard that, he said, yeah, I wanted my guys to get it lower than 37. And,
well,
that's where his mind is.
The reality on April 15th for a lot of Americans is not going to be good. Just a prediction. Thank you, Art. I hope you come back.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks very much.
Enjoy the rain in Nashville. Art Laffer. Thanks. Citizen. Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy is going to lay out the case for us. Coming up shortly here.
And as an American citizen, Huda herself and her family simply want to face our legal system. She's willing to pay whatever debts she has to society. She's even willing to spend years behind bars if that's the debt she owes.
Together with Susan G. Komen, we're committed to reducing U.S. breast cancer deaths.